Good evening and welcome to the fourth and final forum with the candidates for office for November 3rd's elections. This is a forum brought to you by Cayuga Community College and the Citizen. I'm your moderator, Guy Cosentino. On November 3rd, voters across the nation will go to the polls to vote for president and members of the House of Representatives. That's had a lot of attention. But there are also in New York State, all the members of the New York State legislature up, 63 members of the Senate and 150 members of the Assembly. Cayuga County has 2 assembly seats. 2 weeks ago, we brought you the candidates for the 130th Assembly District that covers the northern part of Cayuga County. Tonight, we bring you the forum for the 126th Assembly District that is an open seat for the first time in almost 21 years. Assemblyman Gary D. Finch, who has held the seat since a special election in 1999, has decided not to run for re-election this year. The 126th Assembly District is a district that includes the city of Auburn, the southern half of Cayuga County, parts of Onondaga, Cortland, and Chenango counties. This year we have both candidates for that post in the studio. They are Republican John Lemondes, who is on the Republican, Conservative, and Independence Party lines, and Dia Carabajal, who's on the Democratic and Working Families line. With the COVID-19 pandemic, we have had to make some changes. This is the first forum you've tuned into. While we have both candidates in the studio, the person who will be asking the questions, Jeremy Boyer, the executive editor of The Citizen, whose weekly column appears on the editorial page on Thursdays, is not in the studio but remote for us. We've also limited the number of individuals in the studio to our camera persons, the 2 candidates, and myself. Usually we have a student in here who's a timekeeper. I will play that role today, holding up a sign that tells candidates when they have 30 seconds or their time is up. Our candidates are sitting in the order of their opening statements. We have with us John Lemondes, who is on the Republican, Conservative, and Independent lines, and Dia Carabajal on the Democratic and Working Families. We'll hear from Mr. Lemondes first. Welcome to the studio.
Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Jeremy from The Citizen. Thank you, Cayuga Community College, and thank you, Dia, for being willing to participate in this forum. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here to discuss the issues important to all of us here in New York State, and most importantly, the 126th Assembly District. As you know, I am running for that seat, and that's the purpose of this debate today. I'm running for this seat because I'm a concerned citizen above all else. The things that have happened to New York, driving citizens and businesses out of the state, has to be checked. New York right now, as we speak, has the highest taxes in the country, the highest minimum wage in the country, the highest out-migration in the country, the second highest utility rates in the country, and an overzealous, egregiously overbearing business climate. This is what's forcing our businesses and people out. We've lost 1.5 million people since 2010, and we have to stop that. Additionally to that, I want to work on the bail reform, which was passed, which is significantly harming us and making our streets more dangerous. And on top of all of that, the overzealous overreach of the governor with respect to executive powers. This has to be checked and returned to the legislature. For these reasons, I'm running and asking for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now hear from Dia Carabajal, who is on the Democratic and Working Families line. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Guy. Thank you, Jeremy, for inviting us here today. Thank you to Steve Keeler and the Cayuga Community College Telecommunications Department. I'm Dia Carabajal, and I'm running for New York State Assembly to represent Central New York in the Majority Caucus. I have been twice elected to the Auburn School Board and have served on the Auburn City Council, and I'm ready to be your voice in Albany. My core values include fighting for equitable funding for our schools, both K through 12 and higher ed, especially community colleges, advocating for the health of our Finger Lakes as well. They are threatened by global climate disruption. Promoting economic development through arts and culture, striving for equity and social justice, and supporting working families and labor. I'm a professor of mathematics right here at Cayuga Community College. I live in history's hometown, Auburn, New York, with my husband Lee and our son Matthias, who is almost raised. He's a junior at Syracuse University. I invite the people of the 126th Assembly District to trust me with their votes as they have before. Thank you.
Thank you both. And when we close, we'll reverse order. You'll go first on the closing statements, but we're going to, in between, have Mr. Boyer the executive editor of The Citizen, ask you questions. The rules are very simple, as we've stated before in letters to you. He can ask of either of you or both of you. If it's for both of you, we'll flip back and forth. Sure. So if it's the first questions for both of you, Professor Carabajal will go first, and then Colonel Lemondes will go second. And if it's for one of you individually, you will have 2 minutes. If you want to respond, if it's to your opponents, directed to your opponent, you will have 1 minute. For any of the questions you want to follow up, give me the high sign one way or the other. We'll give you a minute back and forth. We'll try to keep that to 1 or 2 back and forths. We've been pretty good about that, sure, except in the Senate race last week. So with that, Mr. Boyer, welcome for the 4th time, and thank you for volunteering to do this even though it's remote.
Oh, thank you. Thanks for making it work with the staff over there, and I'm glad we could continue to provide these for the people that reside here in the community. And thanks to the candidates for agreeing to participate. We really feel it makes a big difference when we can ask you questions when you're both together and kind of compare the answers and see the similarities and the contrasts. So with that, we'll dive right in. With this district, the 126, I think everyone here just automatically thinks it's Gary Finch's district. He's been our assemblyman for about 2 decades, so people know what they're getting with Assemblyman Finch, and he's been very well connected with all the people here in Auburn and Cayuga County for a long time. So my question to both of you is, how do you think you would approach the job in comparison with Assemblyman Finch? In what ways would you be similar, and what ways do you think you would be different, or what change would you bring?
Professor?
So one of the ways that I'm similar is I'm from Cayuga County, so our stomping grounds are the same. We have the same network of people, the same network of elected officials that Gary knows, I know, the community. I know the community well. So those are similarities. A lot of differences. Differences are that I would be representing Cayuga County and the 126th in the majority caucus. That will give us a different voice. We know that the majority caucus is a place where things are happening. That's not to say that downstate Republicans or downstate Democrats are going to necessarily listen to me, but you need to be in the room where it happens in order to have the conversation. So those are things that are different, as well as just my general outlook. I think that my priorities are different than Gary Finch's were. I come from an educational background. I come from the school board, and I come from city council. So those perspectives are somewhat different that I've come up through the ranks. Also, things are changing. Times are changing. So those are differences, and I think that I will represent it with a fresh look and with the ability to bring funding home in a way that other representation have not.
All right, thank you. Mr. Lemondes, the issue of Gary Finch and what you like and what you're not like.
Thank you. Well, there's nothing that I don't like about the job that Gary's done. He's done an incredible job, and I am honored to have his endorsement in going forward. As I look to represent the people of the 126th District, I'd like you to know that I've already put behind me 33 years of extremely valuable leadership experience from all different backgrounds: the military, business, big business, high-tech business, agriculture on our farm, which we own and operate in Lafayette. We come from a different part of the district. We have different networks, and we have some of the same networks. I have been all over the district being introduced to not only Democrats but Republicans. And I am happy to say that I am going to approach this from an apolitical perspective, where I will work with everyone, regardless of background, and look forward to doing so. Some of the differences that you might find between Gary and I are that I am going to, not that he didn't, but I'm going to make sure that I look after the 16,000 or 12% of the district's disabled people with passion and compassion, as well as the 9,000 veterans in this district. I am very passionate about these issues, and I want to make sure that everybody knows, every one of the 135,000 people in this district, that I will look forward to working with you and will look after our issues because I, like you, am a concerned citizen with what the majority party has done to us.
All right. Thank you. Ms. Carvajal, you'll have 1 minute.
So I do believe that having loyal opposition to whatever the other side says was what Gary did quite a bit. He just was opposed to whatever the majority caucus did or whatever the Democratic governor did without trying to necessarily work with the governor and without trying to necessarily work with the majority caucus. I believe that there is a place to, I will work with the majority caucus and with the governor when needed, but I also will oppose the majority caucus and be a working legislator as needed.
All right. Thank you. Mr. Lemondes, you want to respond?
Yes, thank you. I want to make sure that it's clear for the record that my commitment to New York State is deep. I was born and raised here. I can account for my time to the day. After my military service, my family and I came right back here. And that is another difference, that I would never vote for something just because that's what the party said to do. I want everybody to know that what the best thing for the district is what I will pursue. The best thing for New Yorkers is what I will pursue. This is why I want to make sure that everyone understands that the business-crushing taxes that's forcing our people out of the district and out of the state is something that I'll go after. I can work with anyone and have learned and honed these skills in the military for 27 years, working with every single demographic of America and every single race in America to a considerable extent. Thank you.
Because this is an important topic here, we'll let Ms. Carvajal another minute on this subject.
So I just would like to address something that has been said quite a bit, and that is the business-crushing atmosphere of Central New York. That is simply not true. If you look back into the most recent economic prospects or economic reports out of Tom DiNapoli's office, we have had the largest economic expansion since the early 70s in New York State. Also, this issue of outmigration. Outmigration is a buzzword, but the reality is that our population in Central New York and in this region has been flat and slightly increasing. You can reference the same reports from Tom DiNapoli's office. Our economy has been expanding up until COVID, and our population has remained flat. It has leveled off with a slight increase.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lemondes, we'll give you the final word on this, and then we're going to get back to Mr. Boyer.
Thank you. The number one thing you need for economic prosperity is population growth. We know that 1.5 million people have left New York State. In fact, I'm going to cite a Cornell study, which I think we can all assume is a legitimate institution, one of the best in the region, in the state, and in the nation. In Shenango County alone, Shenango County has lost roughly 350 people per year since 1990. That's the acid test to what's happening across the state. That's just in this district. That's one county. People are leaving, and they're leaving because of many reasons: high cost of living, high taxes, outmigration pressure, bad business environment. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Boyer.
All right. One of you, or I guess you both kind of spoke to this, and it kind of made me think of a question, and I maybe kind of putting you both on the spot a little bit. But when you talk about the need to, or the willingness to stand up for your district against the wishes of your party, of the statewide party, can you each give an example of that you can think of, of an ongoing issue where you know what the majority Democrats would say, and Dia, you would stand up to that, and the same thing for you, Mr. or John. You know what the Republican position is, and you're gonna take a different stance on that. Is there something right now that you can think of along those lines?
Mr. Lemondes, you can go first.
Thank you. I would have to say that that's situation-based. I'm not in office yet, and I don't want to Monday morning quarterback anything that the Republican caucus is doing now, because their work is critically important. And as we've discussed, the majority has in place a number of things that we have to work with them to work through. Bail reform is one of them. I think they understand the disastrous effects of this, as well as the economic consequences.
Thank you. Professor, where you might disagree with your Democratic caucus.
So educational funding, right? So the foundation formula is broken, and it disadvantages upstate cities and rural districts in a way that it doesn't downstate districts, simply because of shares. Shares are part of the broken funding formula. Right now, troubling upstate cities, AIM funding. Okay, AIM funding is being cut, and it's being looked at, and it's being adjusted through every budget, and so is CHIPS funding. Those are issues that the Democratic caucus tends to agree with the governor on, but those are issues that are specific to the 126 that put us at a disadvantage. Also, there are issues that put us at a disadvantage that are, one of the things is the lack of legislation. You can, many policies are put through as part of the budget, okay? Bail reform was snuck into a budget, and then it was put through rather than being legislated or talked about, as well as teacher assessments was done that way as well. All of those are issues that can be addressed and should be addressed from the point of view of Central New York. We are not in the city, we are not in that metropolitan area, and we are affected differently by what happens in the majority and in Albany, regardless of whether it's majority or minority caucuses putting it forward.
All right, thank you. Mr. Lemondes, you have a minute to respond.
Thank you. Again, when it comes to the economy, there's nothing more important than our jobs. That's what keeps us here. That's what enables prosperity to take place. With respect to New York, one simple thing that has to be changed is the scaffold law. We're the only state in the nation that has it. By any measurable means, this is absolutely crazy and business killing. This is one way to recoup money for infrastructure projects and reduce their cost. Elimination of the scaffold law in and of itself is estimated to yield an additional 12,000 new jobs and 150 million injection into the economy. So these are the things that we have to go after and that are hurting us.
Okay, Professor, you'll have a minute.
The scaffolding law protects workers, keeps them safe.
I'm going to move on. We'll use the last. We'll give you 1 minute more, and then go back and forth, and then we'll go to Mr. Boyer. Mr. Lemondes.
Thank you. The proof in the pudding with the scaffolding law is when you take, say, for example, $1 million to make a school upgrade, half of that's going to go, up to half of that is going to go to the insurance companies. Which means to make $1 million investment in a school, you're going to need $2 million. And so this scaffolding law, we are the only state in the nation that still has it. That's the test. We're the only one of 50 that still has it. It does not meet its intended requirements, and it drives our costs through the ceiling.
Okay.
It protects workers.
All right. I'm going to now turn to Mr. Boyer.
All right. Well, I'd like to shift to an issue that's actually going to be front and center here in Auburn tomorrow night, and that's the Owasco Lake watershed. Tomorrow night, the town of Owasco and the Auburn City Council are expected to vote to approve what they would like to see as changes in the rules and regulations for the watershed in order to protect the water quality of Owasco Lake, and it's been a multi-year process. My question for both of you, one of you is going to win this race, and I imagine the local governments are going to hope that you really push the state to adopt these, because ultimately the State Department of Health has to be the final decider on this issue of whether to change and in some cases increase regulations. So I'd like to know where you each stand on that. Are these rules and regulations a good step forward, and the ones that you will promote should you be elected?
Okay, we'll start with Dia Carabajal. It's your turn for the first question.
Absolutely, I'll support them. The watershed rules and regulations that have come through have been a partnership between the town of Owasco, through the city of Auburn, as well as many towns and communities that surround Owasco Lake. 2 years ago, we had microcystin toxin show up in our finished drinking water inside the city of Auburn and the town of Owasco. It was an emergency situation. Our lakes in the 126th Assembly District deserve our care and our stewardship. So the 126th Assembly District has Cayuga Lake, Owasco Lake, Skaneateles Lake, Otisco Lake, as well as the Kettle Lakes of Onondaga County and Cortland County, and they deserve us to protect them. These watershed rules and regulations are at the forefront of this type of care. The Skaneateles Lake Association is looking to these same Owasco Lake watershed rules and regulations as a model for how they are going to work with their watershed to ensure the health of their lakes. So it is something that I worked on as a city councilor. It is something that I recognize as extraordinarily important because of the threat to not only our lakes, but the threat to our drinking water as well. So 45,000 people in Owasco and Auburn get their drinking water from Owasco Lake, and 500,000 people get their drinking water from Skaneateles Lake. So these are very important issues. And they also brought together multiple municipalities and multiple jurisdictions to get it done. So it is definitely something that I support. Thank you for the question.
Thank you. Mr. Lemondes, the issue of the Owasco watershed rules and regulations that will be put before the bodies tomorrow night.
Thank you. I don't think there's going to be too much disagreement when it comes to anything with respect to clean drinking water. This is imperative to get behind. It's imperative to make sure that we have clean drinking water for all of our citizens, and it's imperative that we take the consolidated approach for the long run. And I am all for everything that we can do to keep our pristine waters pristine, because not only of the recreational benefit, but for the drinking water in our cities and municipal areas that go to our citizens. This is critically important to get behind this. I have been already involved in many of the Owasco Lake meetings. I've been a member of the Onondaga County Soil and Water Conservation District Board for 4 years, implementing projects countywide for, as I said, 4 years. One of the great things we've done is 12% of the Skaneateles Lake watershed is now permanently protected, and that percentage is going to increase every year. And this is the result of a consolidated approach, which I would like to help with as we continue to move forward to strengthen these bonds to take care of our water quality.
Thank you.
You're
Ms.
welcome.
Carabajal, you'll have 1 minute.
So I would like to add that I think that it's important that the perspective of the Finger Lakes be expressed in Albany. There are many projects out there that are helping to preserve our natural resources, but it's not guaranteed that that funding stream or those grants are going to come back to the Finger Lakes. So I think that it's really important to have somebody with a Finger Lakes perspective in Albany who can speak to these issues.
Mr. Lemondes, you'll have 1 minute as well.
Thank you. Dia, to your point of speaking to the issues, I couldn't agree with that more. As a farmer, I've put my money where my mouth is, and I have installed several solar systems on my property to not only reduce our carbon footprint, but also to reduce our energy consumption and cost. This is critically important, and I think that as a representative of all agriculture within the district and within the state, that it's critically important for people to understand the steps that farmers are taking and the steps that and the progress that they're contributing to in this area. And being their representative ensuring that this voice not only has an emotional aspect to it, but also a technical aspect to it.
Thank you. Ms. Carabajal, you'll have 1 minute.
So individual responsibility is very important, and we could all take that individual responsibility for global climate disruption, because this is what's happening to our lakes right now with harmful algal blooms is the symptom of the bigger picture of global climate disruption. So it's what we are locally feeling because of this bigger issue. We have to take a responsibility of prevention, okay, of cleanup, because there is damage to our lakes right now. And then we also have to take on any emergency situations that come up as a result of this. And these all require funding beyond what our local municipalities can provide. So we need that watchful eye that can bring the care back to the Finger Lakes.
Mr. Lemondes, you'll have 1 minute on this as well.
Thank you. In addition, I'd like to say that I like, as a scientist and a farmer and a businessman, I like to use data, and I like to make informed decisions with data. When the 9-element plan comes out, that will enable us to make much more informed decisions. And I think that we should utilize that plan to its fullest extent, as well as everything that we're doing up until that's released. It's critically important. The DEC's role is critically important. I believe in the DEC, their role, and working for funding throughout the state as well as down to the local areas, local level.
Professor?
The 9-element plans are only one piece to the puzzle, right? So we need to use all pieces to the puzzle. The 9-element plan also takes a great deal of time. As we wait for 9-element plans to proceed, we are also incurring damage to our lakes and to our environment. There are other things, such as total maximum daily load, that can be looked at. There are other organizations that all need to be pulled together. So it's a multifaceted problem that does require many tools, the 9-element plan only being one of them.
Okay. Mr. Lemondes, you'll finish off this subject.
Thank you. Nowhere did I intend to convey, if I did, that I would rely solely on the 9-element plan and take no action up until its release. As I said in the beginning of my statement, a consolidated approach is always the best approach, and the incorporation of the information that comes from that plan is critical to the overall health of our water bodies.
Mr. Boyer?
All right. I almost fell asleep there. No, I'm just kidding. Just kidding. It's just been a while since I spoke. I actually have a question for each of you, like a specific question. So I'll start with Mr. Lemondes. And for you, the question I had about I wanted to ask is about how you got into this race, because you didn't initially seek this seat. It was a group of candidates after Assemblyman Finch announced he was retiring, came and sought out the party's endorsement, and the person that was chosen by the party ultimately chose to decline, and I guess is the right term, to decline the endorsement and just drop out of the race, and then the party leaders came to you, and that's how you got in. Given that background, I guess, can you explain why you were late in coming into the race? Why didn't you jump into that initial group of interest seekers? And as part of that, I guess, address any voters who might think that's some indication that you might not necessarily be committed to the job.
Sure. I don't know where anyone would get that. I sure hope people aren't thinking that I would not be committed to the job. I've been committed 120% to everything I've done my entire life, to include risk my life fighting for this country in two places called Iraq and Afghanistan, to include standing up for law enforcement all over the place, multiple rallies everywhere. So the circumstances of my coming here, as you may know or may not know, I did attempt to run for Congress in 2014. I did not. There were 8 candidates. I came in number 2 of 8. Congressman Katko received the nomination, and I chose not to primary him for the benefit of the party and the defeat of Dan Maffei. That was a very tough emotional decision, but since that time, local leaders have checked with me periodically about running for different seats in different offices, and did I still have political interest? Was I committed to doing something else? And when those leaders came to me for this, I chose to. In the middle of all of that, our daughter died, and there was a period of time where we did nothing but focus inwardly on our family. And so I want to make sure that everybody understands when they ask about commitment, is all I would do is ask you to ask anyone that knows me how my commitment level lies with respect to any endeavor that I undertake. Yes, I am absolutely, totally committed to turning New York around. That's why I fought for New York in Iraq and Afghanistan.
Ms. Carabajal, anything to add? Okay, Mr. Boyer.
Thank you. And the question for you, Ms. Carabajal, you are a former Auburn City Councilor, and you did seek re-election. The years in the pandemic have made everything run together in my head, but I'm pretty sure this was last fall that we had the local city council election, and voters ultimately didn't re-elect you for this seat. So my question, based on that experience, and Auburn does have a big portion of the population of this district, is what's your message to those who voted against you in Auburn for that race, for why you would think they should vote for you this time around?
So there were only 50. I only lost by 50. I'd like to
Sure.
I'd like to point that out. To those 50 people, I do believe that there were other reasons that people voted. For example, we know that there was a 5-person Democrat majority. That was everybody. It was a unanimous Democratic seat. And I think that people wanted balance, and so that was part of the mix. I think that people have trusted me quite a bit. I think that I have won 2 elections to the Auburn Enlarged City School District School Board, which is a bigger area than just the city of Auburn, and the people have trusted me as an elected official prior to that. So to those people who made a tough choice for city council, I hope that some of the issues that are larger and that I understand very well as coming up through the ranks will make them reconsider. I do believe that my experience and the city council and the school board gives me a unique perspective as to how Albany does. Every decision made in Albany does affect everything that we do, from the school lunches to our sidewalks, to our volunteer programs, to our playgrounds. So I understand in a unique way the way that our city, our area is going to be affected. And I hope that they look again to trust me as I move toward Albany.
Thank you. Mr. Lemondes, anything to add?
No, thank you.
We'll just take a break for a second, because we've been a little bit over 30 minutes. We're halfway through our forum for the 126th Assembly District. We have both candidates in the room. This is the 4th and final forum being presented by the Citizen and Community College. I'm your moderator, Guy Cosentino. Jeremy Boyer, the executive editor of The Citizen, is on the phone asking the questions of both our candidates, who are sitting in the order of a draw of straws or a flip of a coin for their opening statements and closing statements. We have John Lemondes, who is on the Republican, Conservative, and Independent lines, as well as Dia Carabajal, who's on the Democratic and Working Families lines. And again, we'll turn to Mr. Boyer.
All right. Well, why don't we go into a little bit of the financial state of New York government. There is a very large and as the economy continues to be in the state it's in, growing state budget gap, and there's a good debate about what we should be doing about that. And at this point, The governor has talked about some major across-the-board cuts in aid and withheld aid in some spots, but he's also holding out for some kind of relief package to come from Congress and lobbying hard for that. My question to both of you is, I guess, first of all, do you think, has it been responsible to kind of hold off on major cuts so far in the hopes of Washington coming through? If not, where should we start looking to make cuts? What are some of the specific agencies or particular spending areas that you think Albany has some room to trim?
Mr. Lemondes, you'll have 2 minutes on that very complex question.
Sure.
So.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to address the economy of New York. Number one, when it comes to waiting for federal aid, it can't hurt to wait. Some of that will defer the extent of the pain that we're experiencing, but it's not the only answer. Our problems are structural. They're decades in the making, and they, if we don't address those structural aspects of what's making our economy poor, we will never get out of the hole that we're in. The pandemic did not cause the hole. The pandemic simply exacerbated it. And so I believe that several things could be done to answer your question. One approach is decrementing all the agencies by 8%. That's not necessarily effective. It's not necessarily the best approach, but it is a approach. As I mentioned previously, the scaffold law, that would reduce the cost of public works projects significantly. That's one way of generating savings on municipal projects. There are many things. There are lots of tools in the toolkit, but I would want to do this in concert with the majority party, because at the end of the day, we are all New Yorkers, and I would think we all have the best interest in mind of our state's fiscal position and reversing it.
Thank you, Colonel. Professor, on the issue of the budget gap and whether to hold off because of federal funding. You have 2 minutes.
Yeah, so we are in a budget crunch with regard to our budget. Some of the ways that we can work with it is to increase revenue streams. There are several proposals to increase tax brackets for the ultra-rich. I would be open to all of those possibilities. There is also, we need to look at the tax code again for the ultra-rich. There are many tax loopholes that could be closed. So I think that we need to look to revenue streams. We do need to look to the federal government for support. And it is not aid coming back to us. It is our tax dollars that are coming back to New York State. We pay our tax dollars to the federal government to take care of issues such as this. So getting our tax dollars back from the federal government, especially under the emergency situation that we're in. New York was hit early and it was hit hard as a result of the pandemic. So those are issues that we need to be careful of. The other issue is that 20% across the board is not necessarily equitable. For example, 20% in AIM funding cuts from the state affects Auburn differently than it will affect the town of Genoa, differently than it will affect Camillus. Auburn, the city of Auburn, at a 20% cut in AIM funding will cause a $1 million deficit. That is huge compared to the town of Genoa or the town of Camillus, where they would only lose $34,000 in cuts. So we need to, if we're going to take a look at cutting, we need to not take a broad brush and cut across the board, because it affects us all differently because of these formulas of how it's delivered. We need to take a scalpel and look at it very carefully.
Mr. Lemondes, you'll have 1 minute on this.
Thank you. When it comes to taxation, again, the idea of taxing any group extensively isn't going to solve the problem. That's going to force those people out. They are mobile. they're business owners, and when they leave, there are fewer jobs. And so I am not a fan of unilateral taxation policy on any particular group. We all need to pay our fair share. But I don't want to do anything that's going to force business owners and force wealthy people out of the state. The governor has already been on TV begging people to come back. He's recognized the problem that New York's environment has created for these people. He personally, I saw it on TV, begged them to come back. He even said, I'll cook for you. We have to do things differently. And here's what I know. What we've been doing has put us in a pickle. We can't do the same things or else we will never get out of it. So we have to look at everything introspectively, increase revenue streams, of course, and
Thank
do
you.
that.
Thank you. We'll
Yeah.
something tells me we're going to be coming back to you in just a moment as well. But Professor, you'll have 1 minute on this issue of the budget.
The ultra-rich do not pay their fair share in taxes. They have loopholes that protect them and advantage them in their paying of their taxes, and there are no tax brackets for the ultra-rich. The middle class continues to be burdened over and over again with taxes in a different way than other tax brackets are. I would like to address the school taxes. School taxes is something that we are burdened with in a large amount as the middle class. If the school tax funding formula was fixed, then our tax burden as individuals, as the middle class, would go down, especially in small city school districts and in rural school districts. Fix it and fund it. That's what we need to do. If we fix it and we fund it, then our burden, our local burden for school taxes will go down.
Mr. Lemondes, you'll have 1 minute as well.
Just as an example, the highest outmigration demographic of our 1.5 million people that have left New York, 23% of that group has gone to Florida alone. In comparison to Florida, New York has 33% more state jobs, twice the state budget, and we have roughly equivalent populations of 21 and 20 million people, respectively. That's just an indicator of what we need to do differently. Again, what we've been doing has gotten us in a pickle, and in comparison to just a state like Florida that is ranked number 4th in the nation with respect to its overall tax policy, this is why people are flocking there, for better economic opportunity.
Mr. Carabajal, you'll have 1 minute as well.
So I can't be concerned with what's happening in Florida, but I do know that our population has remained flat over the last 10 years, and prior to COVID, New York State had the largest economic expansion that it's had since the early 70s.
Hey, Mr. Boyer.
In terms of we touched on school funding and aid a little bit, but I just want to kind of get your take on school aid cuts of any type as a potential gap filler or gap closer. Do you believe school aid cuts should be on or off the table in terms of dealing with the budget deficit? Professor,
You're up first for 2 minutes.
I believe they should be off the table. Schools are dealing with much more. They don't have the PPE they need under the pandemic situation. We need to provide more assistance to them to clean the buildings, to make sure that our students are healthy, to make sure our educators are healthy. This is not an area which I would look to cut during this pandemic, and that is also the same with health care. I wouldn't look to cut health care during this time.
Mr. Lemondes, you'll have 2 minutes as well on this subject.
Thank you. Leaders have to make tough decisions in tough times. That's why they're leaders. Other people won't make those decisions. I would hate to see aid cut like this. But I also don't want to exclude anything before we are able to look at the problem holistically. Again, we are in a very tough spot in New York, and we have to look at everything. I don't want to see aid cut. My own kids benefit from that. And that's what makes this so troubling and so difficult. But in order to make it holistic, decision that benefits everyone equally, we have to look at all sources of potential savings and potential revenue increases.
Thank you, Colonel. Professor, you have 1 minute on this.
So if we're going to see ourselves past this pandemic and the issues that are here, we need to preserve our quality of life. And quality of life includes education for our children, it includes access to higher education, and it includes health care for everyone. If you want to see the population change and start to move downward again, then cut education. Make it so that New Yorkers can't get health care. Those are quality of life issues that really need to be preserved throughout this emergency situation and as we pass through it.
Thank you. Mr. Lemondes, you'll have 1 minute as well.
Thank you. Dia, I couldn't agree more. The necessity of health care is something that we do very well, and we need to maintain that. The necessity for education, and I watched your interview. I'm gonna quote Brian Mannion, of all people. A society that can't educate its people, its students, its children, will no longer function. And I thoroughly believe that. It's just as important as external security and internal security. We have to be able to look at what we're doing, maintain our education, and improve it. For God's sakes, we spend the most per child in New York State and have some of the worst results to show for it. Again, indicators overall of measurable things. These are all indicators begging us to do better.
Thank you. Ms. Carabajal, you'll have 1 minute as well.
I just would like to point out that I've actually been in the position to have to make the cuts, to make the hard decisions with regard to school budgets, with regard to city budgets. So I do know that the decisions have to be made, and I'm certainly capable of making the decisions that are important. But we need to make the decisions for cuts through a lens of empathy and a lens of values. And if you know what those core values are, then you can make the decisions that are best for your community. And all I'm saying is that education and health care are priorities for our community.
Okay. Mr. Lemondes, I think you have the last say on this for 1 minute.
Okay, thank
Go
you.
back and forth.
I want to say that from a perspective of looking after children, whether they're children in our regular schools or disabled children in our special schools, which my daughter attended in Cortland County, those people that run those schools are special. They have unique needs, and those needs have to be met because they are looking at the part of our population that oftentimes is left behind. And having been a parent of a disabled child and a soldier and an officer and a leader in terrible conditions, I want everybody to know that I will never leave anyone behind. I know what that means. I am committed to the duty of this job as I have been committed to everything else I have undertaken in my life. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We have about 15 more minutes left in this forum. Mr. Boyer.
All right. Let's make sure we talk a little bit about the COVID-19 response in New York State. I'll kind of leave it pretty broad because I know there's a lot of territory to cover. So for both candidates, I just really want to get your thoughts on the state's response. What has been done well? What hasn't been done well, and what do you think we need to be prioritizing as we move forward?
Mr. Lemondes, you get to go first.
Thank you. Thank you for the question. I think this is a terrible situation that's been thrust upon us. I also think that the premise of your question, there have been many things that have gone right. There have been many things that have gone wrong. Some of the things that have gone right were the president's immediate elimination of Chinese inbound traveling. I think that he received extensive criticism for that, but it was the right thing to do. And again, he had to make a leadership call. He had to do it early, and he was the recipient of extensive criticism for doing so. In New York State, things that went wrong. I cannot accept the deaths of our elderly, again, a disadvantaged group, in our nursing homes. I don't know, I'm a scientist by trade, I've got a technical degree. I took 10th grade biology in New York just like everyone else. I took 1 million scientific courses in college and throughout my professional career. Putting sick people in nursing homes, our least capable facilities of handling them, was the wrong thing to do, absolutely. The federal lending of the U.S. Comfort and the conversion of the Javits Center were all things that could have lessened the effect of where those people went, and they weren't even used. The Comfort got here and was turned around. This makes no sense to me whatsoever. So when we ask what could we do, I'm not one to Monday morning quarterback a current sitting leader, because it's always difficult to make those decisions when you have to do so, but it's part of the job. It comes with the territory. So I want to make sure everyone understands that we're not through this yet. There are many more decisions to be made, and hopefully we'll listen to our medical professional communities in what to do as we go forward, because that's what I think is the right thing to do. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Ms. Carabajal, the issue of a response to the COVID-19 pandemic.
So I disagree. I think that the federal government has failed us, and I believe that they continue to fail us without passing a broad package of support for us, for our schools, for our health care, for our cities and municipalities that will become insolvent as we move forward. Our federal government has not responded well. So I believe that at the time the governor responded well. There are reasons that we should have a strong leader and a strong executive and a strong person for emergency communications, so that we all get the same information, so that we all move in lockstep. And I feel that here in New York State, we were lucky enough to have the governor lead us through the dark. It is time now for us to move back to taking the executive powers away from him so that we can legislate. We know what those emergency situations are. We know how to handle the pandemic. We know about testing. We know about tracing, about disease tracing, and we should be able to move forward. And we also need to make decisions as a group to move forward. But I think that New York State has responded in a good fashion with very little help from the federal government. We do need the federal government to respond to us now, and we need their support to bring our tax dollars back to us for this recovery. We need to recover as far as our health. We need to recover as far as our economic soundness, and we need to recover our quality of life. The federal government needs to bring our tax dollars back to us.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lemondes, you'll have 1 minute.
Thank you. Anytime there's a crisis, there are multiple things that have to be done. And as we saw here, some of them have been correct, some of them incorrect. I want to say that I think I have faith in our government overall, which is why I fought for this country and put my life on the line for it. I have faith that we will find the right answer and do the right thing, as long as we're willing to work together and not criticize leaders until the cows come home. Agriculturally, we did a lot here. New York State and the nation, through the CFAP program, which was federal, was helped considerably. That helped our farm as well. There are a lot of things that a pandemic brings, most of them bad, but all hope is not lost. And I want to make sure that people understand that I am looking at this from the glass is half full. And if we work together, we will get out of this together. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Carabajal, you're going to get the final on this side, because I'm going to give Mr. Boyer one last bite of an apple.
I just want to point out that the cows have come home. We are in emergency situations. People are going to become homeless. People are already food insecure. Our municipalities are teetering on insolvency, as well as our school districts. And so the federal government does need to pony up at this point in time. They have been waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting. We need those tax dollars back to us now.
Okay. Mr. Boyd, I'm going to give you a chance for the last question.
Okay. Well, let's talk about cash bail, because I know that's been a topic that's been discussed a lot in the past year as far as New York State government. So with the cash bail elimination for most crimes that went into effect at the beginning of the year, there was quite a bit of pushback, and the legislature reset things a little bit and added another group of infractions to become cash or to become bail eligible. My question for both of you, I guess, given the reset that was done, are things in the right place now as far as our cash bail system goes in New York State? If not, what additional changes would you like to see?
And I believe we're starting with Professor Carabajal on this one.
So I'm on the record as having been opposed to cash bail. The Auburn City Council opposed not opposed to let's start again. The bail reform. The Bail Reform Act went into effect on January 1st as part of the budget. So bail reform was tucked away in the budget. When the budget was adopted, it automatically happened. It automatically happened without input from legislators, without input from the judiciary, without input from law enforcement. So, and when it came through the budget, it also came with a whole bunch of unfunded mandates that fell back onto municipalities and villages and the like. So it was a problem in the way that it was put forth, and the fact that there was no consensus, that the stakeholders were not brought together to have the conversation to make it a more more cohesive bill, one that was agreed upon, one that had consensus from all stakeholders. So as a result, it came out imperfect, chock full of unfunded mandates, and it immediately needed to be changed, right? Because the discovery process in it was extraordinarily flawed. On day one, nobody knew exactly what to do. So well, cash bail needed attention. It was widely agreed by all of the stakeholders that it was something that needed attention. The manner in which it was done never got consensus from all stakeholders, and then created a very a bad situation, something that was untenable.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Lemondes.
Thank you. The bail reform law needs that should start over again. I am completely against it. All of the law enforcement leaders and corrections officers, police officers that I have spoken to have all said many things with respect to the problems that this creates. One of them is, as we know, the unfunded mandates, they have to go and stop. Additionally, I believe that the decision on public safety should rest with the judges to determine whatever those pretrial conditions are for that individual charged with that crime. When that is taken away from our judges, which, by the way, this has been constitutionally assessed many times and affirmed constitutionally that it's okay to do that and it's the right thing to do, but yet again, New York State is the only state that doesn't allow for this. When you don't have the rule of law, respect for the rule of law and public safety, everything else crumbles. So not only does it have this effect deliberately at the point of the crime, but it also impacts police retention, law enforcement recruitment, as well as all aspects of how we keep our society safe. This is the wrong thing to do. And to Dia, when you mentioned the way that it was passed, I couldn't agree with you more. As these mandates, as these bills become law, passed in the middle of the night through the majority party without any of the right stakeholders discussing it, you get these unintended outcomes that are terrible for all of us.
Okay.
Thank you.
I'm going to let you respond, but you have 30 seconds to respond
Okay.
because we do need to go to closing statements.
Okay, so all I want to say is this isn't the first type of legislation that's come through the budget process. This is a trick that Albany uses over and over again, and it creates the same problem. Several years ago, teacher assessments happened the same way. There was no conversation with stakeholders, and there was no consensus, and it came in wholly through the budget process. That has got to stop. We need to have working legislators that work on these bills and make them work for the people.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Lemondes, you want a half minute or no?
No.
No, okay. We're going to go, and we're finished. Mr. Boyer, thank you for your thoughtful questions, and thank you for hanging in here for a new world for the last 4 forums. So we're going to change over to our closing statements. As we said at the beginning, we did a flip of the coin, and we reverse order on the backside. And Dia Carabajal, who is on the Democratic and Working Families Party line, has 2 minutes for her closing statement.
Thank you so much. I am deeply concerned about COVID-19, the pandemic which threatens our well-being. Our physical wellness is threatened, as well as our economic soundness and the quality of life that we have. This will take precedent over all other issues that are before us. We will need leaders that we can trust and leaders with empathetic hearts making decisions with us and for us. We will need representation in the majority House to be heard by leadership. We will need representation with the ability to act. Decisions that affect us will be made swiftly by those in power. I'm deeply concerned about our Finger Lakes because they are threatened by global climate disruption. We have harmful algal blooms in our lakes and invasive species in our water that are threatening our water quality. We run the risk of being overlooked again in Albany. This is not new. This is something that we have endured for multiple decades. As rural communities and small cities, we have lacked representation in a position to provide funding back to our communities. As school districts, we watch as our communities are provided with, other communities are provided with the funding that they need, but not us. As municipalities, we watch as our city streets crumble and our vital public infrastructure continues to need attention. We have been ignored for 15 years as community colleges with flat funding. Representation in the room where it is happening will help us have a better future, to see ourselves through hardships that lay ahead, and to preserve our quality of life as we move to the other side of this crisis. Our representation in Albany has been inert, ineffective, and stagnant. Our communities of Central New York deserve better. My experience as an elected official will help me hit the ground running. Our communities deserve representation in the majority. I ask you to trust me with your vote on November 3rd.
Thank you, Dia Carvajal. We'll now hear from John Lemondes, who's on the Republican, Conservative, and Independence party lines. Colonel.
Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen of the 126th District, fellow New Yorkers, I'm asking for your vote because I'm a lifelong leader. I've led my entire life in the military, in business, in agriculture, and have done most of that with the idea of New York in mind. Wherever I lived, wherever I was stationed, whatever I was doing, I am a New Yorker and I'm from New York. And that's what's been in my mind the whole time. I want you to know that my commitment to you is strong. I want you to know that the things that are plaguing our state and have plagued our state, crushing taxes, overregulation in business, outmigration of people, second highest utility rates in the nation, bail reform that's not working for any of us and making our streets more dangerous, the loss of police officers because they can't do their jobs because their elected officials are derelict in their duties, and a governor that overreaches his authority at every opportunity. I will work to right these things for you and with you. I'm a team member, I'm a teammate, I'm a fighter, and I want you to know that as a businessman, farmer, father, husband, I am completely committed to making New York the power that it once was.
Thank you, Mr. Lemondes, and thank you both for putting yourselves out there. Not always an easy task, most likely not even an easy task in a COVID-19 pandemic world. We were talking about how campaigns have changed before we started here. So we wish you well in the final week of the campaign. We thank you for your participation here on behalf of the college and the Citizen. I want to again thank Mr. Boyer, who's joining us remotely, for adapting to the situation. I know he likes to be in the room and look you in the eyes when he asks you questions, and hopefully he'll be able to do that the next time we're back here in the spring with school forums. We'd also like to thank you, our viewers, for taking the time, whether it was for this forum for these two assembly candidates or you've joined us for all four. We do hope you go out and exercise your right to vote. Early voting has already started in New York. I think as of today, on Tuesday, 400,000 went out over the weekend. So we encourage you to go out there to vote. The Citizen on their website, auburnpub.com, will have this video on tonight. You can also go to the college's YouTube station at Cayuga Media and watch all of the forums and all of our shows here. A quick programming note or two. We return on Thursday to our regular series of programs with Inside Government and Beyond the Front Page for the rest of the fall 2020 semester. Oddly enough, the gentleman who each of these two would like to succeed will be here. Gary D. Finch will be in here, Assemblyman Finch, on Thursday, October 29th, to talk about his career in public service and give us an Albany update. In between, we also hope next week to also have Senator Seward remotely to join us as well. Next Tuesday, Auburn School Superintendent Jeff Parazola will give us a district update that will include how the phased-in reopening during COVID-19 has gone, including the recent case at Casey Park Elementary School and how that's being handled, as well as a district financial outlook. Next Thursday, the 5th, is our final show, fall 2020, because we've front-loaded our season because of the pandemic. We'll finish with Cayuga County Public Health Director Kathleen Cuddy, who will give us an update on COVID-19 and how it is impacting Cayuga County. Until Thursday, for Cayuga Community College and the Citizen, I'm Guy Cosentino. Have a good night, be well, and we will see you back here on Thursday.